Good morning. My name is Dotti Harness-Foster. I'm a Feldenkrais practitioner, and today's lesson is giddy up your steps. You will need to have your shoes off. You can do this in stand. That's the preference. You'll need a sturdy chair so that you can rest a hand on the back of the chair. It's also incredibly effective in sit position. So there's my contact information, insightfulbodymoves.com, my personal cell phone. And let's talk a little bit about technology, okay? First of all, thank you for joining early. If your bandwidth is intermittent, as in it's a choppy receive on your end, you can cut my video, you can cut your video. That's typically in the left-hand corner is a stop video button. Also down at the bottom in the center is an explanation box. It's a chat box. My husband is here to monitor the chat. So if you have any questions, you can type in the chat because you're all muted during the class. So this lesson helps to encourage the organization from the sole of our feet to the top of our head, the alignment between our legs and our pelvis. And you do not need to take notes because I already have on my website a one-page reference sheet and an audio. So here's a picture of Moshe Feldenkrais, and he taught, this is a picture from the 1960s. He taught worldwide, and he was passionate about teaching people the skeletal connections from throughout our whole body. And so we're going to be really dialing into that during this lesson. So I want to show you one of the things that we're going to be talking a lot about is, I mentioned the sole of the feet. So Skinny Rick can easily demonstrate this. So the camera is going to zoom into the bottom of his foot. Notice the bone in our big toe and our second toe, and how the bone structure is almost double in our big toe as it is in the other toes. Now I'm going to turn it so you can see the top part of the foot. And what's interesting here is the structural alignment between the first and the second toe, how it comes up through several bones here in our ankle, but it's a beautiful alignment up here into the tibia, which is the main supporting bone that goes up into our knee and, of course, into the femur and up into the hip. Okay, so let's get started. I want to talk a little bit about the position. I'm going to move Skinny Rick off to the side. So some people ask me about how these lessons can be so effective in sit. Well, if I'm slouching around in my chair, my legs are not supporting me in any way. But as soon as I come and get my legs a part of my seated position, my feet are flat on the floor, my legs are hip distance apart, they are helping me to maintain a dynamic seated position forward in my chair. From here, I can walk in my seat, scooching my pelvis, hiking it up, forward and back. Now what this looks like in standing, we're going to start out in stand, And you're going to be behind your chair so that you can have a hand on your chair. Feel free to change it up through the lesson. You may start and sit and want to stand or vice versa. So we start any awareness through movement lesson with how do we feel at the beginning? So pick your position, sitting or standing. Your feet are flat on the floor, your legs are hip distance apart. Notice how you stand there. Where is the weight in the right sole of the foot? Maybe forward into the ball of the foot or the heel, and compare that to the right leg. Where is the weight in the sole of the left foot? And notice the bend in your ankle from the top of your foot to your shin, coming up into the bend of your knee. Your legs may be straight, maybe one leg is bent a bit more than the other. And continue up into your pelvis and feel free to put your hands, wrap them around your pelvis, get a sense of what bend do you have? Maybe you're tilted forward, tilted back. And you can tell I ask a lot of questions and you may not have the answer, but I invite you to just be curious about them. And notice where your chest, your heart is directed, which may be similar to your horizon. Where do you look out? Straight ahead, maybe you're looking down in the direction of the floor or up toward the ceiling. And notice a spot on the wall, the floor, where your horizon is, maybe at nose and eye level. And what is the position of your head? It could be tilted side to side, forward or back. Just note and walk around a bit. I know we have small spaces in our homes, so you could even walk in place. Those of you sitting can be walking in your seat by hiking one hip and then the other, walking forward and back. Notice the smoothness of your walk, the spring in your step, how sluggish you feel or not. And shake it out. Okay, we take a lot of rest, and in this lesson, you can rest and sit and lying down. For me, walking around and shaking it out, because this is a standing and walking lesson, is really effective. So next is the position with your chair for those of you standing. I'm behind my chair to the right of my chair so that my left hand can rest on the back of the chair. Okay, get yourself there. Your feet are hip distance apart. You're looking straight ahead, and transfer your weight to the left foot closer to the chair and then back to the right foot. And just go back and forth slowly enough so that you can take your awareness to, oh yeah, I know my weight is now in the left foot and I know it's in the right foot. And then keep your weight into the right leg. That's going to be your standing leg, and hike your hip. And I'm going to turn forward to the camera. What this means is you're going to take your right hip up and then set it back down. So your right hip comes closer to your right elbow. And when you do that, your whole spine is involved in a side bend. Okay? So hand on the chair, transferring your weight to your left foot, hike your right hip up and set it back down. So the right leg just dangles down with gravity, and repeat this movement several times. And notice how now with this movement, you're hinging over the left hip. You're looking straight ahead. Allow the whole left side of your ribs to open up with each hike. Notice how your right ear comes down a bit closer to your right shoulder. Beautiful. And shake it out. So you're in charge of ease and comfort. So there's parts of this lesson where it's really asking, especially your pelvic muscles, to really work in a different way than they're accustomed to. So that may mean a lot of breaks, okay? So our next position, if you're in seated position, we're going to be pivoting our heel outward and inward. The heel just pivots on the floor, and you can feel that all the way up into your hip. It's fascinating. In standing, you're coming behind your chair to the right with your left hand on the chair. You're standing on your left leg. The ball of the right toe stays in contact with the floor, and you swivel your heel in and out. Outward, and then come back to your neutral standing position. So the heel is just scooching across the floor. And if you wrap your right hand around your right hip, you feel this heel pivot movement coming all the way up into your femur, which is moving in that hip joint. And for right now, I bet most of you are keeping your torso still. Do that for a few more times. And now allow your torso to track the movement of your heel. So as your heel goes out, that ripples up, and you may find yourself looking to the left. As your heel comes back to neutral, you're looking forward. Heel out, turn your whole self to the left, but it's the heel that's directing this movement. So it's a lot bigger of a movement, but very different in your standing leg. There's a little spiral happening in your left leg. And then leave your torso in place. Get a sense of how that changes the movement. Your standing left leg is stable and steady, while the right one is pivoting out with the heel, and then bring the torso involved and switch it back and forth. And let's shake it out. That's a lot of work on that standing left hip. So you can lie down, give your weight to the chair, your choice. So now we're going to repeat those last two movements on the other side. Okay, I'm going to switch my chair so you can see me. And I'll face the camera for right now so that you can see my right pelvis is going to hike. My right leg just dangles down. I just noticed I messed up my right. I'm standing on my right, my left is hiking. So behind your chair, to the left of your chair, so that the right hand can be supported by the chair. And begin to hike up your left hip and set it back down. And every time you hike up your left hip, you are hinging over your steady right standing leg. Notice how your left hip comes closer to your left elbow. Allow your torso to do that side bend to the left so that your left ear is coming closer to the left shoulder. The right side of your ribs is opening up. It's a lot of work on that standing leg. And let's shake it out. So as we progress through this lesson, we are diving into a lot of the details of our gait. And every time we step, our pelvis is not only doing a little bit of a hike, like what we've just done, it's also doing a rotation. And all of this happens so smoothly that we don't even really recognize it. But little bits and pieces of our gait. Okay, coming back to that same position behind your chair, to the left of the chair so that your right hand can be on the back. Your weight is in your right foot. Your legs are hip distance apart, and we're going to pivot our left heel out and then back to the standing position. It's a small movement, but a dynamic movement. So if you wrap your left hand around your left hip, you feel how the heel is directing this movement all the way up into the femur, which goes deep inside your pelvis. And you can just feel that outer bone. And now invite the torso to participate. So the heel is saying, okay, everybody move along and participate in this pivoting movement. As the heel goes out, you find yourself looking a bit toward the right. Your whole chest is directed to the right as the heel goes to the left. And then keep your torso forward while you continue that movement. So we're going back and forth now at your own pace, allowing the torso and everything to be involved, and then keeping your torso straight. It's a very different movement when we move everything. It brings in a little spiral in that right standing leg. Whew, and let's take a break. Shake that out. I don't know about you, but I feel it in my right standing leg. And I do this stuff a lot, but it's finding muscles that I must not use as often as I would like. So while you take a little break and shake it out, I'm going to show you the next movement. In sitting, your hip distance apart, feet flat on the floor, and the direction is to take your knee forward. When you take your knee forward, your pelvis comes forward also. I'll do that a few times, taking my knee forward like that. So what this looks like in standing, behind your chair, hand in contact, we're going to slide our knee forward and our pelvis comes forward also. And remember the point that I made earlier about skinny Rick. As you roll your foot forward, you're going to come to that sweet spot between the first and second toe. So your turn, get situated. Feet, you're behind to the left of your chair so that your right hand can be on the chair. Feet hip distance apart. And let's start out with just rolling forward on our left foot. You're coming to that base of the ball of the foot between the first and second toe. You're just rolling up to that and setting your heel back down. The right leg is your standing stable leg. Now take your focus to taking your knee and your pelvis forward. So the knee goes forward and the pelvis goes forward. Keep your torso fairly still here at the beginning. So again, it's a little bit of a spiral in your right standing leg. Your left knee stays softly directed forward. And now let the torso participate. So every time the knee comes forward, the pelvis, the left shoulder comes forward, you find yourself looking over to the right, then keep your torso still. You're looking forward while you continue to slide your knee and your pelvis forward. Go back and forth with this, recognizing the difference of when your torso is involved and when your torso is still. And let's shake it out. So there's countless scenarios as when we walk about our day, there's many times where we're directed forward. Everything's moving, but we're directed forward. But anytime we go to one side or the other, we're using components of the things that we're breaking down right now. Okay. Come to the other side of your chair behind and to the right of your chair so that your left hand is in contact with the chair. Your standing supporting leg is your left leg. Let's just roll our right foot, coming forward to that sweet spot in the ball of your foot between the first and second toe. Now switch your focus to sliding your knee forward. And the same movement is happening in your foot, but your mental awareness is a bit different because you're sliding your knee forward. Now, broaden your awareness to include the forward movement of your right hip, along with your knee, along with the roll of your foot. We're keeping our torso fairly still. Then when you feel that you have an awareness of the right leg rolling, sliding forward, bring in the body. Invite the body to be part of this knee and hip coming forward. So this engages the left leg is standing, but it's also spiraling because we're rotating a bit around it, and then leave the torso still. Go back and forth. Beautiful. Shake it out. So I'm going to show you this next movement for those who are doing this lesson seated in your chair forward. Your legs are integral part of this dynamic seated position. We're going to blend those two movements. So you're going to bring one knee forward, then the other knee forward, and take a knee back, and take a knee back. So you're walking in your seat. You're allowing your shoulders and everything to move, just as if you were walking. Those standing, you're going to come behind your chair. I'm just about a forearm distance, so my body has room to move between the back of the chair. My hands are just resting here for a little bit of stability. Feet start out flat on the floor, hip distance apart. And we're going to blend these two movements. So take one knee forward and one pelvis forward and set it back down. And then switch to the other side, keeping the torso still at the beginning. And notice what this feels like. Do you really have to focus to keep your torso still? And take this pace at about a walking pace. And now bring in your torso to participate. So as your left knee goes forward, your torso is looking more to the right. As the right knee and right pelvis slide forward, you're looking more to the left. Some folks think of this as almost a dance movement, very hippie knee, and switch back and forth so that your torso is still, you're looking straight ahead, and then allow the torso to participate, making it big, making it exaggerated a bit. Your head is involved. And switch it back. At about the walking pace. And shake it out. Okay, for those, it's a good time to round ourselves, just so that we take a little bit of a break. So when I say round ourselves, whatever feels comfortable, lying on the floor, sitting, maybe even standing, take your hands and just wrap them round your back. Let's take a moment just to bend the other way. And even in sit with your hands down near your knees, it invites your whole spine. You're looking down towards your knees. If you're lying on the floor or standing, just round yourself. Our next movement, I'm going to show you first in sit. That dynamic seated position where you're forward in your seat. You're going to bring both toes closer to your shin. Some people say toes toward the nose. So your forefoot comes closer to your shin. And what this does, it allows your pelvis to round back, and you tend to be looking down towards your knees. When you set your foot back down, you come back up to this dynamic sitting position. So I'll exaggerate and take it slow, toes toward the shin, rounding, tilting your pelvis back, looking towards your lap, and setting your feet back down, dynamic seated position. In standing, you're coming to behind your chair, and transferring your weight into your heel. Notice how your pelvis goes back, and you tend to take your gaze down from the horizon a bit. So come into position, standing there, look forward, whether you're seated or standing, look to get a sense of where your horizon is before we do anything. So mark that on the wall. Where is your horizon? Hands on the back of your chair. Transfer the weight into your heels, and the pelvis goes back and the head goes forward. And set the feet back down and repeat this movement. And it's a constant adjustment for your body to keep you balanced. So when your weight goes back, your head and chest comes forward. So that's why your horizon tends to go down the wall a little bit. And now let's come up onto our toes. So we're rising up, your horizon comes up, and set your heels back down and repeat this movement several times. You're rising up onto your toes, your legs are straight, you're coming up to that structurally supported spot between the base of the big toe and the little toe. And blend these two movements, toes to rocking back on your heels, rolling forward onto your toes, rocking back. Let your torso, your head be a part of keeping yourself balanced. And make this back and forth movement smaller and smaller until you come to a spot where you're neither on the heels nor the toes. Your whole sole of the foot, both feet, are in contact with the floor. Now, keeping your horizon level, bend your knees, which brings you to the ball of the feet, just like we did before, and then set your heels down. So this is a different movement in that your horizon stays level. So that means the bend is happening in your knees and in your pelvis. So you're rolling forward onto the first and second ball of both feet, bending the knees, keeping your head fairly level. And now let's bring in taking our weight back into our heels, then rocking forward on our toes, keeping our head level. So that means you're really finding where is the bend and flexibility, not only in your legs, but your torso. And let's go back and forth. So straighten your legs. And now your horizon goes up every time you come up onto your toes. And the horizon goes down when you come back to the heel. And then bend your knees and keep that horizon level. Your body, your pelvis, your chest, your head, throughout this whole movement is working like crazy to keep you balanced. And go back and forth, straightening your legs, bending your knees, and make this movement smaller and smaller till you come to a spot where the sole of both feet are flat on the floor. You're neither on the ball nor the heel. All the entire sole feels really supported and on the floor. When you get there, get a sense of how dynamic that feels and shake it out. Take a break. So our next step, we're going to be combining some of these, but changing the position of our feet, okay? When we bring our feet into a narrow stance, we are challenging our stability. That's why the chair is handy. So we're going to be swiveling our hips, bending our knees. So you can do all of this in sit, or if you're standing, you're behind your chair, just like what we were. We're going to start out with our feet hip distance apart and flat on the floor. Your hands just resting on the back of the chair. And start out by sliding your knee and your pelvis forward, just like what we did before, keeping your torso still. Do that a few times. And now bring your feet in closer together so that the base of your big toe is touching, your inside of your ankles may be touching, and continue this movement. So it's a bit smaller. You have a constraint here of the legs being close together. So you're sliding your knee, one knee and one pelvis forward, and then the other. And invite the torso to participate. So it's almost like a swish swash, swivel movement. So when your right knee comes forward, the right shoulder comes forward, the left knee, left pelvis forward, the left shoulder. And go back and forth. So keeping the torso still, you're looking forward at the horizon, then invite everything to follow the lead of the knees sliding forward and the pelvis sliding forward. Go back and forth. And increase the speed so you almost get a sense that you're a wash machine that's going back and forth because your pelvis is swishing back and forth. And then keep your torso still. And come to your stance with your feet together, flat on the floor. And like we did before, we're going to rise up onto our toes and then our heels. Let's do that again with straight leg. So your horizon is bobbing up and tilting down. If you're seated, your pelvis is rounding back. You're coming forward to a dynamic sitting position. And then bend the knees and do that same movement, rolling over the sole of your feet, keeping your horizon level. And make this movement smaller and smaller until you come to this spot where the sole of your feet is flat on the floor. Your knees are over your ankles, your pelvis is over your knees. Get a sense of what that dynamic standing position feels like before you take a break, because we're going to come back to this. And shake it out. So our next movement involves the chest. And I'm going to bring Skinny Rick in. His chest doesn't move too well, so we're going to work on this together. The first step of this is taking your chest, your heart forward. So I'll demonstrate, but it's a very, very small movement. You may not even see it on a small screen. I'm taking my chest forward, and then I take the back of my back between my shoulder blades back. And if you don't see it in me, don't be surprised. It's a small movement. And then we keep our chest still and move our shoulder blade. And Skinny Rick really shows this one well. So his chest is still. His shoulder blade glides forward and back. And notice the movement in his arm. When the shoulder comes forward, his arm goes forward. When the shoulder blade comes back, the arm goes back. And I'm going to turn him around so you get a sense of what's happening behind. Say our shoulder blade is moving across the back of our ribs. And nothing, all of this movement in the arm is happening with the movement from the shoulder. So your arms are just going to dangle down, but when we walk, we have a lot of movement in our arms, which really starts here in our spine and into our shoulder. So without your chair, for those of you standing in your chair, you're in a dynamic seated position. And take your chest forward and bring the back of your chest back. It's a small movement. If anybody walked in the room right now, and they probably wouldn't recognize that you're doing much of anything. And make that forward and back movement smaller and smaller. You're looking out at the horizon till you come to a spot where you feel that your chest is supported over your pelvis. And let your arms dangle down by your side. And now keep the chest still and move your shoulders forward and back. So this feels like a bigger movement to us because there's a lot more glide of your shoulder blade, your clavicle. That's the collarbone that comes around. In fact, it's really fascinating. If you take one hand and cross it over your heart, you can feel how your fingertips, underneath your fingers is the clavicle moving. And notice how when your arms are just dangling by your side, this movement is all initiated into the shoulders gliding forward and back, but there's quite a swing in your arms, and allow that to happen. It's just a dangling, like your arms are just part of a suit jacket that, you know, there's just no energy. They're just dangling with gravity. And make this back and forth movement of your shoulders smaller and smaller till you come to that place where your arms are draped down your side. You may get a sense that the inside of your forearm is in line with your pelvis. So the next movement is really odd. And I tried to figure out how to show this, but it involves the movement of our head. You can relax for a moment, get a sense of how you're standing, because we're going to come back to that. But our head is a big part of how we is used a lot for balance in how every step we take. So what this is, you're going to imagine a tabletop, and I just have a clipboard here. This is my imaginary tabletop. I'm going to imagine setting my chin on top of an imaginary tabletop, and I'm going to slide my chin forward and back. It's like a pecking movement. My nose comes forward, the back of my head goes back. So it's not an up and down, it's a forward and back. Okay, come back to your dynamic standing or sitting position. You're behind your chair, feet hip distance apart. Find the stability of both sole of the feet, making sure the knees are over the ankles, the pelvis over the knee, your chest over your pelvis, your shoulders dangling down, your hands on the back of the chair, looking out at the horizon. Slide your chin forward on that imaginary tabletop. So that tabletop comes right below your chin. So it's a very odd pecking movement, taking your nose forward, then taking the back of your head back. So make this movement smaller and smaller till you come to a spot where your head is neither forward nor back. Check in to where your horizon is. And now take your chin, drop it down closer to your chest, and go take your nose up. So it's up and down movement. Yes, movement. Taking your head up and down. We do this a lot, but we're also doing this constantly when we're walking, and make this up and down movement smaller and smaller till you come to that spot where you're looking out at the horizon. And when you get there, get a sense of what this feels like, this dynamic standing position, because you're going to shake it out, then come back to this. Now, most awareness through movement lessons have some imagination to help us internalize these movements. So in this next movement, we're going to scrunch ourselves down. We're in our standing position. You can do this in seat. You scrunch yourself down as if you had to walk through a culvert. So your nose stays forward toward the horizon. The top of the head is inside this culvert that's not quite tall enough for you to walk through. So that means your pelvis, your knees, and I'm going to turn sideways so you can see the bend in everything to scrunch myself downward through that culvert. And then we're going to take a few imaginary steps through the culvert, and we come out of the culvert and go spring ourselves up, walking on our toes. So it's blending all these movements. So whether you're seated or standing behind your chair, or you may want to stand in the open where you can actually be walking through this imaginary culvert. So come with your feet hip distance apart, scrunch yourself down, your nose stays out, and walk through that culvert. So you're stepping in place, or you could be walking forward, your knees are bent, your pelvis is bent, and then we're going to pop out of the culvert up onto your toes as if the top of your head could go to the sky. And then scrunch yourself back down, going through that culvert. Very different movement. And then pop out of the culvert, taking your head, extending, lengthening your whole torso, and scrunch. And we're going to go back and forth. You're finding the spring of your legs as you come out, and then the scrunch. And when you come out, you feel that giddy up in your step, and then scrunch it back down. And make this back and forth movement, the culvert and popping out, less and less, so that you find your neutral walking, giddy up in your step that's neither lengthening and popping out nor scrunched down. There's this sweet medium for you where you're looking out at the horizon. You could be walking in place. If you're seated, you're neither slouched in your chair You end up at this dynamic seated or standing position where the horizon is before you and you feel like you could make a grand entrance into a room with a giddy up in your step. So that's the end of this lesson. I call it Giddy Up Your Step. Moshe Feldenkrais first titled it Standing and Walking. And I love how it breaks apart all the different components of how we walk, and there's so much more to it. I repeat this lesson again Saturday, 9:30 Alaska time. And all of this is on my website, the reference sheet, the audio, and this has been brought to you absolutely free by the Northwest chapter of the American Parkinson Disease Association and the Homer Council on the Arts. And November is the month of giving. So now is a delightful opportunity. If you feel this has been helpful and can be heartful, consider a donation to either one of these organizations. So next, I'd like to show you a video, one of my favorite illustrations of a 30-second video of African women walking, the graceful, the power, how they propel themselves forward. Notice the movement in their arms. There's a head bob, but it's smooth, it's graceful. The roll of their foot, how their knee and their pelvis is coming forward and back as they propel themselves forward. The more you know about walking, the more you just love to watch people in a public setting walking and moving through space. Beautiful. Oh, and to my website. Okay. So the question came up is where all this information is. Insightful Body Moves is my website, has the handouts, the audio, and the Homer Council on the Arts also sends you a link. So make sure in your inbox is Zoom and homerart.org, and you get links to all this information.